Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So the really good news is that Robert Downey Jr. has been confirmed for Spider-Man Homecoming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how he might fit into that film, especially considering that Marissa Tomei is playing Aunt May. I haven't had the chance to see Civil War yet, so I don't know if Marissa Tomei is in that, but the funny thing about Robert Downey Jr. and her is that they started a movie together in the early 90s called Only You. You don't need to watch it or anything, it's just a romantic comedy starring those two characters, but I like the idea that Tony Stark is going to be like the cool Uncle Ben proxy that just hits on Aunt May shamelessly all the time. In that 90s movie that they starred in together, it was actually the other way around. Marissa Tomei's character goes after Robert Downey Jr. But because it's the first Spider-Man film in a new trilogy, I don't know if they would share any scenes together, if Marissa Tomei and Robert Downey Jr. would be on screen together, because it would imply that Aunt May knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And if you remember way back to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, Aunt May didn't learn his secret till way later. But they might change that for the new Spider-Man trilogy, because they're not going to do the origin story. He's already going to be Spider-Man when we meet him, so they're going to skip over a lot of that stuff. And I really like the idea that Iron Man is going to adopt, so to speak, Tony Stark is going to adopt Peter Parker as the son that he never had. Because the closest thing he has to children right now, at least that he knows about, he might have some mystery children floating around the world somewhere, is Ultron and Vision. You can kind of see how Tony Stark has visual parity with Aunt May, meaning that he's right about that age to be a father figure. And we got to talk about Aunt May. There's been a lot of jokes going around about the hottening of Aunt May, because you start with this version of Aunt May, then you get a little bit younger with Sally Field, and now we have Marissa Tomei, which, to be fair, is actually a little bit more realistic given the circumstances, because even though in the comics she's always been portrayed as this white-haired, gentle grandma figure, she is the sister-in-law of Peter's father, meaning that if Peter's a teenager, she'd be like in her mid-40s, which actually looks about right. Like you look at Robert Downey Jr., look at Marissa Tomei, they're about the average age Peter's parents would be. They wouldn't look like grandparents, but that's not the way that Stan Lee drew it originally, so when they did the first Spider-Man trilogy, they were going with a more strict version of the comic book version of Aunt May. This version of Peter, this version of Aunt May just aged down a little bit, so they might be able to have a little bit of fun that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So I'm actually hoping that they play with a little bit and give Tony Stark some scenes with Aunt May, just so that they can have a little bit of fun. But just to be clear, Robert Downey Jr.'s involvement in Spider-Man Homecoming is going to be really small to cameo level. Like he'll help Peter with a problem, he'll be like an advisor character. Like I said, Tony Stark probably going to be thinking of Peter Parker as a son that he never had, so he wants to help him out, but he's not going to overpower the movie. This is largely going to be a Spider-Man story about his universe of characters that also just happens to be connected to all the Marvel movies. So maybe some suit upgrades, maybe some moral advice, although Tony Stark isn't one to be giving moral advice, especially given what's probably going to be happening during Civil War. But in the comics, they actually have a really long history. Spider-Man goes way, way back to the classic Avengers comics. The first Spider-Man Avengers team-up was way back in 1964. Kang the Conqueror actually sent a Spider-Man robot back in time, and they had to team up to defeat it. So yay for Stan Lee, Spider-Man robots all over the place. I know everybody's wondering when he's officially going to join the Avengers. Probably going to be Infinity War. That's also probably when he's going to get the Iron Spider suit, because the Russos did say that when Spider-Man shows up in Infinity War, he'll get a new suit. They didn't specify because the movie's so far off they probably haven't figured it out yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be a version of the Iron Spider suit. The very first time, though, that they offered him membership in the Avengers was in 1966 Amazing Spider-Man Annual 3, so he goes way, way back with the Avengers. What about Infinity War, though? If Spider-Man's going to team up, Thanos going to get the Infinity Gauntlet, there's a really cool story that Spider-Man was involved in with Thanos. In 1977, it was called Marvel 2-in-1 Annual, so you might have to dig through Marvel Unlimited to find it. But Spider-Man flies into space with the Thing to free the Avengers, which have been locked in stasis by Thanos. Adam Warlock gets freed from the Soul Gem, traps Thanos. If you remember Marvel's Infinity storyline with Thane, Thanos' son, who trapped him in a living death, it's kind of a version of that. There's actually this storyline that Spider-Man was involved in with the Avengers that actually involves some of the stuff that's happening in the Civil War trailer. So there's this secret prison called the Raft, which looks just like this in the Civil War trailer. Secret prison way out in the middle of nowhere in the ocean. Naturally, as you'd expect, there's a big prison break. Spider-Man gets invited to tag along, after which they offer him membership in the Avengers. That was in 2004. Much later, during Civil War in the comics, he's actually been fully on the Avengers for a while. He's really close with Tony Stark, who develops the Iron Spider suit for him. I know we're all crossing our fingers that the movies do Iron Spider at some point, but in the comics, Spider-Man ends up switching sides from Team Iron Man to Team Cap, so naturally he and Iron Man start going at it. Iron Man overrides his Iron Spider suit because he developed it, so Spider-Man goes back to his classic costume. But you have to remember that the movie isn't doing comic book Civil War. There's going to be a lot of familiar visual things, but they changed a whole bunch of stuff for the story of the movie. So you can kind of see why Marvel went after Spider-Man so hard. Like, they wanted to be able to use him in the movie so much because he's been working with the Avengers for so long in the comics. All we gotta do now is rally Fox so we can get Wolverine in the Avengers, but not really expecting that to happen anytime soon. But let me know in the comments, how do you want them to use Tony Stark in the Spider-Man movies? You have to remember that a lot of it depends on whose name is in the title of the movie. So any movie with the title Spider-Man in it is going to be way more about Spider-Man than it is about Iron Man. But when you're in a Marvel movie like the Avengers, Iron Man is always going to be a much bigger character. But I am kind of expecting Tony Stark to fill that Uncle Ben hole that's been left in Peter's heart, because Peter Parker is a scientist. I don't know that I would say he's a genius on the level of Iron Man, but if you've been reading the Spider-Man and the Iron Man comics since Secret Wars, like in the last year or so, they've actually changed a lot about the way Spider-Man works. Now he has Parker Industries. He's actually written a lot more like Tony Stark has been written, and Bendis, who has been writing the new Iron Man comic, has taken away most of Tony Stark's money. So it's almost like comic book Spider-Man and comic book Iron Man have traded places. And even funnier, I know everybody's asking about Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy showing up in the new Spider-Man movies. Mary Jane in the comics is kind of like the new Pepper Potts. She's Iron Man's assistant. He just hired her to follow him around as the new Pepper Potts. It's really funny. So what's going to happen next is I'm working on a Zoom Hunter Solomon Flash explainer video, because there were a lot of questions after that Flash episode this week. There were a lot of big reveals, so I'm totally going to do a video tonight just explaining what the hell is going on with that. So be sure to subscribe to get it, and I'll be doing a Doctor Strange video in the next couple days too. If there's any other Marvel or Spider-Man videos that you guys want me to do, just let me know in the comments. I felt like today was a good day to start off with some good news just because everyone's so sad about Prince. But while you guys wait for my next video to post, you can click here for my Baron Zemo Captain America Civil War teaser, and you can click here to learn more about the Spider-Man Homecoming movie. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.